Hi everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am going to share with you the books that I read in November. Quick note, this is Melissa at the end of filming this, and I've just realized I've talked forever, and I prefer my videos to be on the shorter side, so I think I am going to split this into a wrap-up of the fiction I read and then the nonfiction that I read. Editing it into two separate videos might make for some weird jump edits or something. But on to my nonfiction or fiction reads, whatever version of this you were watching right now. I'm actually going to start with something that I was mostly reading in October and finished in November. This was part of my more seasonal spooky reading TBR, and that's The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. This is essentially a collection of stories which are either retellings of fairy tales or inspired by fairy tales. It has a very kind of dark, gothic, fantastical type of tone. And a lot of the stories center women in interesting and different ways from traditional fairy tales. I don't have a whole lot to say about the collection other than that because I find it difficult to wrap up short story collections. I will share with you a couple of my favorites. The Bloody Chamber was one of them. That is a retelling of Bluebeard, and I think she really plays with the role of women as heroines or victims in that story, and I thought that was really intriguing. Another favorite was Puss in Boots, which I just thought was a very fun retelling, very raunchy, but very fun. And another favorite was The Lady of the House of Love, which is a take on kind of vampire myth, but focused more on a female vampire versus say a Dracula male type of figure, and had this tone of sadness around it rather than outright horror, and I thought that one was interesting so far as it really subverted a lot of my expectations. So would recommend this any time of year, but especially for spooky reading season if you are a seasonal reader. The next book that I would like to talk about is The Moor's Account by Laila Lalami. I buddy read this with Courtney Ferreter. I will post a video below, link a video below, because I think Courtney has covered a lot of what makes this book really compelling and the things that she liked about it. I also really enjoyed it, and surprisingly so, because this is not my normal cup of tea. It's historical fiction, which I do enjoy, but the way it was written and some other things about it are not normally things I like in a book. It is a fictionalized version of an actual event. So there was this expedition called the Narvaez expedition in 1500 and something, 1527. And this conquistador from Spain, Narvaez, brought hundreds of men to Florida, and they were traveling the Gulf Coast and were looking for gold and riches and whatnot. And the expedition was an absolute disaster. There were 4 survivors. And one of the survivors in real life wrote an account of this. And in that account, there is someone just listed as one of the 4 survivors. And he was an enslaved person from Morocco. And he's just listed as, here are the 4 survivors, and he's just there. It says, oh yeah, also this Moroccan slave, Esteban. In the book they call him Esteban, Estebanico. And anyway, the author has made up a story around this character. What was his life like? What brought him from Morocco to enslavement to this expedition? And he survived it, one of 4 out of hundreds. And what was that like? And the reason I was surprised that I liked this as much as I did, because obviously the story is compelling. This journey of trying to find gold, of all of these things that happened to this expedition, all the men dying from encounters with Native Americans, through disease, through like getting just like lost. It was incredibly compelling, but the way it's written usually is not a writing style that I enjoy, but I think it worked in this case. So this is very much written in kind of that old-timey way that travel journals and travel logs and these kinds of accounts were written at the time, which can feel a little bit dry maybe, or to me it feels very almost like detached, very formal language. The people recounting their travels in this time period really didn't put their own feelings into and emotions into the writing. And it's written in kind of that style, which is normally not what I like. I enjoy a certain like warmth and intimacy to the writing and how characters are portrayed. I just think the writing in this case, that style, made this feel of the time, made it feel authentic. I also really enjoyed the character of Mustafa. I think this really could have fallen very flat for me if the character was different. He was very morally gray. He had done things in Morocco. He had been part of the slave trade, and he has to live with that and think about that as he's an enslaved person. And I think he does things sometimes which maybe where he's not an instigator, but maybe where he's complicit. And there are other times where he really does take the moral high ground, even to his own detriment or potential harm. And I like that about him as a character because, I don't know, having a character that's purely wholesome, I don't think would have worked. I also enjoyed how his development as a character was non-linear, because that's not how people are. People aren't one way and then they learn and grow through an experience and then they're another type of way. End of story. They learn something, some of it sticks, but maybe they fall into the same habits or they backslide. And sometimes you have to learn the same lesson over and over. And so I like that it was a little up and down and it wasn't just this linear progression as he grew and developed as a character. The next thing I want to talk about is a book that I don't know how to talk about, but I want to mention it because it was so wonderful. And it was Islands of Decolonial Love by Leanne I'm going to forget how to say the second part of her name. Betasamosake, I think? Leanne Betasamosake Simpson. Apologies if that is incorrect. This is a short story collection. Normally, I like your traditional short story. I like, whatever the short story is about, some kind of building climax or character development or whatever it is that's happening in the story, and then some sort of, denouement or ending of some sort. I don't really get on with like short stories where nothing happens. I like your traditional little arc. And these were short stories where kind of nothing happens. I think the difference here is that the character could be anybody. Not that you don't get a sense of the person, but rather than like looking at this character, it was about the experience that this character was having. So every single story was just an experience. There was a story about someone reminiscing on this like road trip they had taken where she left her little like toy model birch bark canoe at this like campsite. There was another story about this person who was on an indigenous reservation and had struck up this relationship with another person who was helping them do like surveys, and how that relationship just kind of like fell apart. And like talking about it, it's like nothing happened. They were on this reservation, They developed a relationship. They were supposed to be doing these surveys. Never got done. They went back to this person's house and collected the unfinished surveys. That doesn't sound like a good story, does it? But it stuck with me. And it was all about just like, there were almost like little snapshots in time. All of them with Indigenous characters, all about, I mean, the title is Islands of Decolonial Love. And they're all about, they all kind of like center Indigenous characters. And everything from really important experiences to very mundane experiences. There were also some stories that were more like almost like modern mythologies. I thought those were fantastic. A lot of stuff about land protection and environmentalism. I'm not going to be able to adequately describe this collection with any more coherence, but I will mention that if you have the means, the opportunity to listen to it on audiobook, I would highly recommend it. I listened to one, the narrator was Tantoo Cardinal, I think is her name, and she brought it to life, and it was just fabulous. I felt a lot of feelings, let's just put it that way, and would recommend that collection. The last thing I finished in November, and I'm saving this to last because it was an accomplishment. It was To Green Angel Tower by Tad Williams. This is the third and final installment of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. It's an epic fantasy. I was enjoying it from the get-go. It took me a while to get into the first book. And towards the end of the first book, I was enjoying it well enough that I thought, okay, this is intriguing, I'm going to continue. I was enjoying my way reading through this big honkin' 1,000-page book. But it was one of those experiences where I didn't realize how much I was enjoying it until it was over. It was pleasant. I thought, oh, this is a really engaging story, interesting characters. And then the story ended, and I got that kind of like slightly sad feeling of like having to say farewell to characters and to a world. And yeah, I finished the book, and then I got that little sad feeling, and I thought, oh, I was really enjoying that more than I even realized. And I think like part of it is to do with like the length. I was in this world with these characters for so long that it kind of hurt to say goodbye at the end. I'm not going to say much more about this because I do think I probably have enough to do a full like non-spoiler review of the whole trilogy, because I have lots of thoughts. I will say, if you like epic fantasy and haven't read this, read it. I think you will really enjoy it. If epic fantasy is not your thing, you will hate this. It is very dense, a lot of world building, 10 million and one different characters. If that doesn't sound like your cup of tea, then you probably have already stopped watching anyway. But if you, like me, enjoy fantasy, but just haven't got around to this, and I hadn't heard of it, frankly, until Rick McDonnell had mentioned it. I started reading this because of read along that I think kind of like got derailed, but I don't really care because I finished reading them and it was a great time. But anyway, all that to say, if you like me hadn't heard of this, then get on it. I think you will like it if you are a fantasy reader, and don't let the size deter you. I am the world's slowest reader and clumsiest reader, and I got through it, so you can too. Those are all of the fiction books that I read for November. If you've read any of them, I would love to hear your thoughts below. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll chat soon. Take care.